So that's why I was intrigued, and also wanted to really participate in an APAC call, which I have not done for a long time. So I'm just coming back into the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Pui Ing from Singapore. Again, the curiosity keep me up at night.
Hi, this is Moshimi. I'm calling from Bangalore, India. And I love attending the APAC monthly calls. So it's more out of my own greed to learn more, to know more, and if possible, apply that to my coaching. And I'm very intrigued and I'm very happy that I'm here to listen to you for the next 1 hour and absorb as much. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's everyone except Shirley and Michael.
And I'm here for the same reasons as everyone else. I can't add anything. Thank you.
And yeah, I'm here for the same reasons, and also I'm just really interested in the art of hosting, and as well as Ba. So I think whatever you talk about, I'll be excited to hear. Thank you.
Okay. You know, it was about, let's see, maybe at least 20 years ago, when I read a book called The Timeless Way of Building. And it was written by an architect by the name of Christopher Alexander. And he was talking about architectural space. And I think I was hooked on that book from the moment I came across the phrase that said, we all know when we enter a space that's alive. And then from there, he began to ask questions about what is it that creates that aliveness. And, you know, what's happened to me over the years is that I've ended up paying a lot of attention to the space that I enter, first of all, and being able to notice whether or not that space has an aliveness to it, has a quality where it's inviting people to lean in, to learn with each other, to be present with each other, to explore what's emerging within that space. And in many ways, that reading 20 years ago really prepared me for starting to deepen more into this Japanese concept of Ba, as I started to explore it and understand it over the last arc of time, and particularly over the last 5 years in Japan. I'll back up a little bit and say that my own relationship with Japan actually started in 1970 when I spent my senior undergraduate year in Japan, and for 40 years, my relationship was a very personal one. And when I was a student in Japan, I met the grandfather of my heart. He became my first spiritual guide. I met the person who I would later marry. We had a very close personal relationship with my host family. And for 40 years, Japan was where I went when I had a chance to be able to just simply slow down, to have a space to reflect, to have a space to be present in a culture that I simply found so deeply nourishing. That all shifted in 2010 when I was invited to bring in the work from the Berkana Institute and the Art of Hosting community. And Art of Hosting is something that Michael has mentioned a couple times. Art of Hosting actually grew out of some work that we were doing at Berkana back in the early part of this century. And what happened was that, we were doing an initiative called From the Four Directions, People Everywhere Leading the Way. And we made the radical statement that the single best way for people to get in touch with their own leadership was to come together in sacred circles of conversation with others who were exploring that same question. Many things within From the Four Directions initiative didn't work out quite the way we planned, but what happened was that we drew together a global community of people who were hosting space in many different ways. And at first, within this initiative, there were arguments among these people about, oh, circle is the only way to move a group forward. And someone else would say, no, it's open space. And someone else would say, oh no, it's got to be appreciative inquiry. And someone else would say, oh no, it's World Cafe. And finally, after a stretch of time, people began to set aside their own preferences for different methodologies and said, let's look at what happens when we start to use all of these different methodologies in cooperation with each other, rather than just being stuck on the one thing that we know how to do well. And out of that conversation, the art of hosting community started to grow. If you visit artofhosting.org, you'll get a sense of the scope and breadth of that community. Essentially, it's a group of people now around the world who are leaning into these questions of how do we create the spaces that allow for conversations that matter to actually prosper. And in 2010, I was invited to bring that work into Japan. Many of us, after the triple disasters of March 11th, look back on 2010 and say it was like Spirit gave us a head start. There were many relationships that were developing in 2010 in Japan that became very important in terms of moving ahead with the work that was necessary and possible after the triple disasters. And just some examples of that, 2010 was when the Japanese translation of Otto Scharmer's Theory U was created, and the Presidency Institute of Japan was launched. It was the time when the Process Work Center of Japan went to a new level of operation. It was the time when the Transition Town movement in Japan began to really take hold and really started to grow. A number of people that were leaning into different ways of creating community were finding their work gaining new visibility, new popularity, and we started connecting with each other. Okay, back to Ba. I remember in January of 2010, when I was just doing this initial work of introducing Art of Hosting and Berkana's principles about leadership, sitting in a circle with a group of maybe about 30 people. And I immediately noticed that the quality of listening that was present in that circle was unlike anything that I had ever experienced before. I noticed what a deep comfort there was in the silence. I noticed how little need there was to break that silence, to say something, and I started to fall in love with Japan in a whole different way, or at a whole different level. And it was really then that I started to understand in a deeper way the importance of Ba and what it meant. And how do I introduce this? I go back to that quote from Christopher Alexander, and how we all know when we enter a space whether or not it's alive. And it's the startling response of walking into a room that's been set up with chairs in a circle and with a bit of beauty in the center of that circle, and the response that it begins to almost immediately evoke, as opposed to walking into a room that's set up theater style with the assumption made that there will be a person who stands in the front of the room who delivers wisdom and that everyone else will sit at their tables and take notes and by some mysterious process become wiser because they have listened to the words of the expert in the front of the room. As you can probably tell, I don't have much patience with that particular model. And I started to pay attention to what is it that we pay attention to if we want to create the kind of conversational space that people are able to lean into. And as I was doing that, it's also when I started to, or continued to concentrate more and more on listening as the beginning portal rather than speaking. And, you know, we all, always in the work that you do and that I do, there's many parameters, many constraints that are beyond our control. But what I found is that when I can, whenever I'm working with a group, and whenever I'm working with someone individually, if I can first begin paying attention to the space in which we will gather, if I can begin by creating a bit of beauty, if I can begin by removing clutter, if I can, you know, in my work, whenever I can, I work in spaces that have immediate access to nature, because I know that as we're working together over an arc of time, being able to move into the comfort and the silence of nature is often an important part of any dialogue that we're involved in. And for me, Ba, you know, in some ways, even though I've done some writing about Ba and I speak about Ba from time to time, it's actually one of those things that it's very hard to put into words, because it's so much, what we're doing is we're working with the body and we're working with an embodied experience, and trying to describe that embodied experience in words is sometimes a bit challenging. But what I know is that when I pay attention to the look and the feel and the invitational quality of the space that people are entering into, magic starts to happen. One of the things that I started saying a few years ago was that my own energetic attention in the space goes to creating a space that invites people to step forward with their curiosity, to step forward with their respect, and to step forward with their generosity. And again, this is where we start moving from Ba into Be. You know, I've had many conversations with people who do what I call hosting work, what other people call facilitation work. Had many conversations with people about, you know, what's essential as we're inviting people into conversation, or what makes enough of a difference to make a difference. And, you know, I think that especially early on in the work that many of us have done to host gracious space that evokes conversations that matter, many of us have spent time saying, oh, you know, I need to learn a particular methodology. If I just really understand how World Cafe works and I become a good World Cafe host, I'll be able to host extraordinary conversations. Or if I learn that thing called open space, then I'll be able to really create incredibly dynamic spaces. And, you know, the place that I've come to and come to in many conversations with colleagues who have been at this work for a long time is that those methodologies, they're helpful, they're useful tools, but they're primarily secondary. And what makes so much more difference, what's really important to attend to, is the way in which I show up in the space myself. So if I want to If what I really want to do is I want to host a space where curiosity, respect, and generosity are present, then what's most important is that I arrive in that space with my own curiosity, with my own respect, and with my own generosity. If I'm present in those ways, I begin to create an immediate invitation for others to show up that way. If I arrive and I'm distracted, I'm not really present. You know, I'm thinking about what, you know, either the fight that I had with my partner that morning, or I'm thinking about where I'm going to be that evening. If I'm just, you know, saying, oh, okay, let's get through this. If I'm not really deeply present, then energetically what happens is that I give that off to other people, and other people move into that distracted space. So my own capacity to show up and to be alive in the space is one of the critical things that helps to co-create that aliveness. If I show up with curiosity and respect, then I invite others to be curious and to be respectful. If I show up with an attention to beauty in the space, then I invite others to pay attention to that beauty. And all of this is so much an art. It's not a checklist. It's not these are the 5 things that I must pay attention to. It's the way in which I enter that space that creates an invitation for the presence of others. And let me pause there and see what confusion, what questions, what ideas I'm generating in this space with the words that I've offered over the last 15 minutes.
Bob, this is Narayan. So I've just written in chat, can I say Ba is being with your being in respect to others and one's own self, just in the here and now?
And let's gather a few comments in the center of our circle, and then I'll try to respond to them.
Bob, I'm Silwan from Singapore. I'd like to make a couple of comments, if I may. As coaches, we think we are good listeners. I don't believe that, because if you think you're a good listener, just ask your spouse whether you're a good listener, and you know the answer you get. Number 2, as a coach again, I know I should speak less and hear more, okay? Speak less and hear more. But it's very, very difficult to practice and to make that into an art. So I just wanted to make those 2 comments.
Thank you.
Bob, it's Dennis from Sydney again. Bob, look, what you've been describing is certainly very, very interesting and certainly very relevant. But I'm just curious, when you describe, for example, you said the primary entry of yourself into the space is most important. So when you say you enter with curiosity, respect, and generosity, are you able to give us some examples of how do you actually do this? I'm trying to visualize, what are you doing to achieve this? So that's my question. Thanks, Bob.
Hi, Bob. This is Michael. I also really enjoyed what you said, and I agree with you fully. And I live and work in Japan, and ironically, I find that people really get the essence level. There's an expression, reading the air. It's a really important part of the culture here. At the same time, they often ask for step-by-step instructions on leadership. And so sometimes I'm frustrated with that because, I want to talk more about this stuff, your presence and your quality of interaction and how that's really, really important part of leadership that, in my experience, is rarely spoken about. And so I guess my question is around how can we bring this out more fully into leadership circles and into our coaching practices, and a very easy to understand practice. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob, I'm Silwan again. I want to make one more comment. I have a Japanese friend who told me that learning the art of tea ceremony, preparing the fire, the tea leaves, rituals, etc., takes 30 years. I couldn't believe that. How much time is needed to learn and master Ba? Thank you.
Yeah. That's such a good point of departure. One of the challenges in all of this is how to work in these ways in a culture, in cultures that are obsessed with speed. And I want to know it now. I want to know it with 5 points. I want to be able to master it immediately, and go on and pick up the next thing that I'm going to master immediately. I want you as a coach to tell me the 4 essential points, and that if I understand those 4 essential points, then everything will be good. And we all know that it doesn't work that way, even though we can easily get seduced into trying to give those 3 or 4 or 5 essential points. For me, there's a couple things that are pretty critical here. The first is that I have to learn to be uncomfortable. I have to learn to not be seduced by people's expectations and their hopes for how I will show up and what I will do. Michael, I've been in many of those kinds of meetings that you're describing in Japan, where people arrive with both an eagerness and a impatience to just tell us what the essence of this is, and tell us what the practices are, and tell us in a way that we can practice them, and do it in the next 45 minutes, and then we'll be happy. And they certainly don't have in Japan or in many other places the patience of looking at this as a 30-year arc to be able to step into a level of mastery. And so there's this immediate seduction to try to do that. I suppose if I could, I might be tempted, but I can't. I can't tell you what the 5 things are that you must do to be able to further perfect your leadership. What I can do is I can start to ask you questions. I can ask from this place of real curiosity. I can ask you questions about so what is it that you're trying to do? What is your deeper purpose here? What's the what is it that's animating you? Why is this important to you? And when I start to engage in those conversations with people, whether I'm engaging one-on-one or whether it's within a group, one of the things that immediately happens is that the attention and the energy in the room turns from me to the other people in the room, or the one other person in the room. And my capacity to be able to be present to their story as it begins to emerge is what actually acts as a midwife to the emergence of that story. Dennis, I think when you ask, so what does it mean? What does it mean to show up with curiosity, respect, and generosity? It means that I show up from this is a totally overused word these days, but I show up from a place of authenticity. I show up with my own real interest in what it is that people have to say. And for me, it's like I have some interesting conversations with my spouse from time to time. She's a person who is actually curious about just about everything, and that occasionally drives me crazy because I don't have that kind of curiosity. The kind of curiosity that I have is that when I encounter another person and I begin to focus in on what their context is, what it is that they're working with, I become very curious about what's really present there. Why is this important? What's really going on for you? And not just the surface answer to that, but what's the deeper answer? What's that one that I actually, that someone, when I'm inviting them into that level, what is the level of discomfort that they need to go through to be able to come to that deeper understanding of what's present for them? And so for me, part of this also is so much of my time is spent dancing with the silence. And we're often, I think, especially in some coaching situations, in some group situations, there's a lot of pressure for me as the person who's playing a primary role in that space. There's a lot of pressure for me to try to give answers, just as there's even pressure on this one short hour-long webinar to give answers to how do we do this. And I feel myself even right now being seduced into trying to give answers, and to be seduced into to the notion that very much can be conveyed in just an hour. I tend to operate more in that 30-year sort of time frame than the hour time frame. But what I know is that if I'm able to show up with that real listening to what someone is saying, and with that willingness to have silence be a critical part of our conversation, or rather than my jumping in to give an answer when the silence starts to be uncomfortable for me, or I'm afraid that the person that I'm working with is going to be uncomfortable in the silence, to stay in that uncomfort, to stay there for as long as necessary, to let something that's new and vital actually begin to emerge in the space, so that I'm not playing the role of the expert, not playing the role of the expert outsider. One of the constructs that a colleague of mine and I came up with when I was trying to understand the role that I was playing in Japan is that we ended up contrasting what I was doing to this role, this archetypal role of the expert outsider. The expert outsider is someone who arrives with answers, who arrives with knowing, who arrives with telling. And we said that what I was doing was more like a sacred outsider. The sacred outsider arrives with questions, arrives with listening, arrives with presence, arrives with an invitation, and arrives with a spirit of co-discovery in the space. And that's really been the archetype that I feel I've been learning about and stepping into over these last 5 years in Japan. And it's why I put these two words of ba and be together. Paying attention to the space that we're in. So even in a one-on-one conversation, when I come into a room and I have someone who wants to be sitting behind a desk with me on the other side of the desk, if at all possible, I immediately change that energetic relationship. A dear older friend of mine, Peter Block, who has done a lot of organizational development work over the years. Peter talks about how we need to sit together with our knees touching, that we need that level of intimacy and being directly present to each other. And that Peter, I don't even know if Peter has ever used the term ba, but that sitting together with knees touching is one example of creating ba. It creates an immediate intimacy, which for many people, frankly, is often uncomfortable. I don't want to be sitting this close to you. I'm so much more comfortable sitting around a conference table where I can play my attention to my laptop and I can be taking notes furiously or whatever else. But there's a way in which the presence of that desk or that table in the room immediately creates a barrier to the communication that's taking place. And I know all of you have experienced all of this. I noticed in this space, for example, the fact that I'm the only person with video on means that I have the disquieting experience of speaking to a number of little black boxes on the screen, rather than being able to see your smiles, see your frowns, see the curiosity in your eyes. For me, being able to have all of those present, whether we're on a Zoom call or whether we're face to face and I'm actually paying attention to that, all of those things are such essential qualities of being able to invite people further in. And there's absolutely no recipe for this. There's no set of there's no checklist. For me, there's no checklist. What I know is that what do I know? I know that my own vulnerability, my own stories, my own willingness to stay in places that aren't comfortable, my own willingness to work more with questions and with answers, my willingness to embrace that I'm not going to be seduced into giving answers, at least not all the time. I'm aware of the irony of everything that I'm saying on this call, because you're here expecting a presentation, and I'm seduced into giving you a presentation, and it's not that there's anything that's particularly wrong with that, but I actually know that these ideas that we're talking about are so much a embodied experience, that there's only a tiny, basically all I can do in this hour with you is I can make you curious. I can invite you into curiosity about these ideas and about this practice, and I can invite you to Sulan, I love your comment about just ask your spouse if you're a good listener. I could invite you to try a few experiments with, first of all, really noticing how you show up when you enter a space, whether it's a one-on-one space or a group space, to actually notice what's going on in your body. What are the discomforts that you're feeling? What's the anxiety that you're feeling? What's the uncertainty that you're feeling? And how do you be well with that anxiety, with that uncertainty, with that discomfort? Maybe I'll say one more thing and then open it back up. One of the, bringing this back to leadership in particular, one of the things that was that became very important to me when I read it many years ago now, was some work by Rabbi Edwin Friedman, who was one of the first person that applied systems theory to families. And Friedman, in some of his writing, talked about how the primary function of leadership in any system was to lower the anxiety of the system. And that when I read that the first time, it just kind of went, yes, absolutely. And as I leaned into that learning more and more over the years, one of the things that I came to understand is that in order for me to do the work that lowers the anxiety of the system, what's required is that my own anxiety is lowered. And so it becomes the first question becomes one of how do I come present to my own anxiety, and how do I listen to it, and how do I let it go? Because if I can't do that, if I can't enter the space as a non-anxious presence, then I have very little capacity to invite people away from their own anxiety and into relaxing into the space. So and that's just one example, but it's my own willingness to notice who I am and how I am and how I'm showing up, my own willingness to be able to sense my own presence as I come into the space, and to really use it as a compass for my entry into the space, become one of the critical features of work in a way that pays attention to both Ba and Bi. And we're almost 8 minutes before the hour. Let me, this time I'm not going to pause, this time I'm going to stop. And I'd like to spend our remaining time passing a virtual talking piece around this circle with the question to each of you of how is this landing? What's making sense? What are you hearing here that may be helpful in your own practice as coaches or facilitators or people who are trying to arouse the leadership of different systems?
Bob, I'm Silwan. You made two comments which resonated very much with me because I spend a lot of time coaching American clients. The first point you made, cultures obsessed with speed. And the second one, you spoke about being comfortable with discomfort. I notice my American friends tend to learn from management, 60 seconds management, become an expert in 60 minutes. Number two, they also believe a lot in instant gratification. I want it yesterday, not today, not tomorrow. Bosses who are very demanding. In short, the American clients tend to be very uncomfortable with both Ba and Bi. My question then to you is this because your civilization dates from 1776, and out in India and China, we go back 5,000 years. And they also always look at the quarterly price of the stock, whereas Japanese companies look at 100 years from now. So it's a question back to you too.
It's Shirley, what you're saying resonates, and the thing that stands out for me is that you've almost got to teach your coaching clients to deal with silence by doing it yourself. And I actually find it easier to do in a phone call than face to face for some reason or other.
This is Michael. Yeah, everything you're saying resonates with me as well. Very powerful. Only question I had was around the quote from the rabbi, Edward Friedman, about saying that our jobs, I guess as facilitators, is to lower anxiety in groups. I was trying to sort of reconcile that with what you said before about, your job is to create disturbances or, so I was trying to reconcile that.
Bob, it's Dennis from Sydney again. Bob, I really enjoyed your seminar this evening. You said it wasn't so much a presentation, but it certainly got me thinking very hard about two things. I guess one is being much more aware of my, self-awareness, is in the space, as you said, that you enter, and how that might impact on the group that you're working with. And then secondly, I had to laugh when you sort of described, being facilitator in a room theater style. I've had that situation where everybody looks at you, and as Siluan says, everyone sort of almost expects instant gratification, and you have all the answers, and then somehow in a space of 15, 20 minutes, you're going to give them and reveal the secrets of the universe. So I certainly want to change that. I want to really invoke this facilitator and very open atmosphere that you're describing. And in fact, next month I have to facilitate a fairly large group. And I think you've now sort of piqued my interest, and I love to try to see how I can adapt and adopt some of your ideas in that facilitation. So thank you very much, Bob.
And this is Su Cheng from Singapore. I just want to carry on from what you just said, Dennis. For me, the takeaway and the most difficult challenge is how do I then lower my own anxiety, right? So that the anxiety within that space can be lowered for everyone else as well. And when we have that pressure of having to be the one up there providing the answers for what they have paid for to come to learn, that anxiety is so difficult to contain. Thank you.
Bob, this is Catherine. I guess I got this one question around my mind, now, is that what could be the first step for me into beginning self-manage my own little tiger inside of me and lean into more Ba? So that question is kind of summarized on your share of your knowledge on this topic, as well as the experience of going through what you raise in terms of the questions in me.
Bob, this is Narayanan from Mumbai, India. Thank you very much. It was a hugely learning experience for me, and I could resonate each and everything that you've said, because I believe in the area of, I look at it from the area of cosmic consciousness and collective consciousness. So that completely resonated. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Moshimi Bob. Thank you so much. My key two takeaways from your talk was, I think, dancing with the silence and the power, the subtle power silence holds in many situations, including coaching. And the second one is paying attention to the space we are in. Maybe calling it out to our own selves, the space that we are in, rather than pushing it just back into the as a backdrop. I think just calling it out kind of will give it far more power and strength. Thank you so much. It was lovely listening to your talk.
So I know that our time is at a close. I want, just listening to you in this last circle, I want to offer two last, two last things. First of all, I believe that working in this way requires each of us to have a personal practice that draws us to silence. And whether that's meditation, whether that is walking in the woods, whether that is some being on your bicycle. For me, the most important preparation for any important piece of work is not all of the last minute details that need to be attended to, but it's my finding some way to simply go off and to quiet my own soul, quiet my own spirit, to let go of the things that are distracting me and calling me away from who I truly am. So one of the things that I try to do is I try to enter the silence myself before I do any important piece of work. Because for me, being in the silence, and particularly being in the silence in nature, helps me settle into who I am in a way that then permeates the entire space. The last thing that I'll offer is that it was just a year ago that my book about my work in the disasters in Japan was published. It was published in Japanese, so I can't read it, which is a little bit strange and embarrassing. And I'm working on what's actually ended up being an English translation of the book. But the editors in Japan choose the title of a book rather than the author. And the title that my editors chose was one that's become a guiding question in my life over the last year. The rough English translation of the title is, "When we cannot see the future, where do we begin?" And I've spent the last year living into that question because it's a particularly powerful question for me. I believe that we're in a time where any delusion that we have about being able to see the future is getting shattered. And I've spent so much of my life doing organizing work, planning work, that's been based on some sort of a notion that I and we could see the future. But I can't hold that notion anymore. I think we're in a time of such systemic uncertainty that we need to learn how to act when we cannot see the future. And that's part of my invitation to all of us, is to learn how to be comfortable there's this interesting trick that I've used the term be uncomfortable and lower anxiety. Actually, in order for us to be uncomfortable, we have to do that from a place of lowered anxiety. So there's much more to explore. And I wish you all well into your evenings. It sounds like everybody's over there on the other side of the Pacific. I'm about to step into a day of inviting people into more discovery about what we know about being healthy in the United States. So thank you for this opportunity to join you. My heart is often stretched around the Pacific Rim, and it's nice to have been with you today.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank
That's
you.
been really,
Thank
really
you.
interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Michael. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay, good night, everybody. Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Sleep tight.
Thank you, Bob. That's been really interesting. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Bob, if you have a minute or two, I'd love to invite you to speak at our conference. We have a conference coming up in Thailand next May.
And let's talk about that.
Yeah, and Shirley, you're on the phone too, right?
Yeah, and would you like me to send the information to Bob, the invite?
Yeah, that'd be great. You send it to him, and the theme. What is the theme, Shirley? Do you have it up the top of your head?
It's meditation for humanity, something like that.
Yes.
Mindfulness. Yeah. So it really encompasses many of the things you've been talking about.
Yeah, I think it'd be perfect.
And that title of the book is just...
I know. Oh my God.
Just brilliant.
It blew me away when I heard that. Oh my God.
Well, I have to tell you what happened to me. This was like last November when I was coming to Japan, and I was thinking about what the English title should be, and on the flight, and I was looking for something that